around the country. I know many of you watch us virtually. We really appreciate your loyalty to our events, but these are a group of people that were nominated as today's honorees, and forgive me because this first one's a hard name and hopefully I won't mess it up too bad, is Bukola Akinwande. He's the Director of Information Security Management at Fannie Mae. I'm sorry I messed that up so terrible. A round of applause for, we love women in cyber as well. There's a lot of great women here today, and men. And I have another hard one. Obi Nokidia, InfoSec Analyst at MoneyGram International. Sorry about that. I will not claim. We do an event in Montreal, and that one's really tough because they're all French there. Okay, Maria Gummerson, Lead Info Security Engineer from USAA. Are you still here, Maria? See, these people are so important that they have to leave. They can't even stay for the whole event. How about Leslie Gillett from PepsiCo, Information Security Analyst? Leslie? All right, come on up. We had the keynote speaker, but we'll have to give you his because I think he had to take off. I don't have it here. It's at the front desk, so I'll give it to you before you leave. Okay, we have, Paul. Is it Mocarski, CISO, VP IT Infrastructure at Sammons Financial, and one of our honorees. Not honorees, one of our panelists. I'm sorry about that. Okay. Now I have, Michael Anderson, who is also Deputy CTO at Dallas Independent School District, and he has been a long-time supporter of FutureCon, so we appreciate you, Michael. I have Michael Gregg, who is Chief Information Security Officer at the State of North Dakota. Thank you, and he traveled all the way here to be with us today on the panel. Leah McLean, she is the Vice President Cybersecurity Specialist from Mastercard. Mastercard pulled a emergency meeting for all executives. She will be joining the panel at 4:15. We have a spot open for her at the end over there, so she will be back with us. Joe Paul from Choreograph, Cybersecurity Compliance Leader, Deputy CISO, and our moderator today. Congratulations. We have George Canyoto, AVP Global Information Services from GM Financial. George, come on up. Joe, how about I let you hand out the people that come up for me so I can. Thank you, George. Congratulations, George. And then I have Emmanuel Ida, Senior IT Auditor from Sony. Ada, yeah. All right, a round of applause for Douglas Watson, Information Security Officer from the Credit Union of Texas. Douglas, are you here still? All right, congratulations, Douglas, and thanks for being out here today. I still have about 5 more. Davey Rule is the SOC analyst at Children's Health. Are you here? Is he here? Oh, okay. Congratulations. There's like such a glare up here. Brennan, is that Brianna Jordan, Brennan, Information System Security Analyst from Intermountain Health. Brennan, are you here? Come on up. Come on down. Yeah, exactly. Congratulations. There's a glare up here, guys, so I'm so sorry. Oh, Anna Ho, IT Manager from St. Jude Medical, and I'm pretty certain Anna's still here. Here, I'll let you give Anna that. Anna, thank you for always supporting our events. And last but not least, I have Peter Sagalini, Director of Information Security from Benefit Mall. Okay. And then we'll give Leah hers. And that is that. And I have all kinds of prizes. Our bar is going to be open after the panel, so I'll be back in here to pull the rest of the prizes while you guys are going through the bar line. My team was giving out tickets. They'll be in here giving more tickets. But most importantly, we have this amazing panel right now, and they're going to be discussing securing the future of the CISO insight and industry leaders discussing current cyber threats and strategic defense practices. I'm going to have Joe Paul is going to moderate. I've kind of already announced all of them since they have their honorary award, so I will turn it over to Joe. So let's welcome our panelists.
And Pete is left. That was Pete Segalini's.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for staying around. I know this panel is the last thing between you and happy hour, but we have some great people on the panel, and I'm sure you're going to get some good information. I'll just let everybody give a quick introduction again. I'm Joe Paul. I've got 30-plus years in cyber and IT, and I'm in charge of compliance for Choreograph, which is a big data company. And I'll turn it over to Michael Gregg.
Good afternoon, Michael Gregg. I'm Chief Information Security Officer for the state of North Dakota. I'm actually based in Houston because it's really cold in North Dakota most of the time. We've got about 250,000 endpoints. One of the things that makes us unique is we're a unified state, so it's a big network, about 250,000 endpoints.
Good afternoon, everyone. Mike Anderson. I serve as Deputy CTO and CISO for Dallas Independent School District. I'm very excited to speak with you all and to field some of the questions for you today.
Good afternoon. Okay.
All right. Good afternoon, Paul Mocarski, Chief Information Security Officer for Sammons Financial Group. Sammons Financial is headquartered out of Des Moines, Iowa. There's a number of companies in the umbrella there. Midland National Life Insurance, North American Company for Life Insurance, Beacon Capital Management in North Rock.
We will have a little time at the end, so if you have questions, save them up for the end, and we'll hopefully be able to answer them, one of the 4 or 5 when Leah joins us. So for the first question, what are the most significant emergent cybersecurity threats, and how should organizations prepare for them? And why don't we start with Michael, number 1, then we'll go to Michael, number 2.
So for emerging threats, I'll say this. At the end of last year, I actually did a post for LinkedIn, and I titled it The Top 4 for 2024. I would have done 5, but it didn't have that alliteration, didn't have that sound to it. So I actually said top 4. One of those I said was potentially IoT attacks. If we look in just the last few months here in the Dallas area, we've had water district attacked. We've had in Pennsylvania, water district attack there, IoT attack. Also had one in Ireland early this year, the one in Ireland. The water was turned off for about 5 days. So for 5 days, no water coming in, no water going out. So IoT attacks is going to be one of the big ones. The second one I would put on that I talked about, I think is really AI. And for AI, a broad area, I think part of that is going to be deep fakes. So think about what people can already do with business email compromise and phishing. And think about now moved forward a step so they have someone actually call someone in your accounting or finance department. They spoof it from the number of a trusted individual, and it sounds like that person, and they say, hey, I want you to transfer this money or move these funds over. I think that's going to be a big thing that we're going to have to look at, is how quickly phishing and things along with deep fakes change this whole game in 2024.
At the end of each year, there are a number of large bodies that put together reports to really help us gain a better lens of what happened over the course of the year. And I'm thinking about Verizon does one, and there's a couple of other ones from some other brands that see an awful lot of traffic over the internet and have cyber practices to go with them. So they're even seeing the customer situation. And I think unilaterally across all of those that reported out for 23, it was business email compromise, ransomware. You're going to also see that social engineering makes the list again. And what's happening is these TTPs are working year over year. And I think, to Mike's point, now that we have AI, we now have an enhancer that we have to be concerned about. And let's just be honest, when the poll came out earlier today and asked, did we have enough talent and time to do all the things that we're responsible for, we all unilaterally said no. And so think about all of the areas like this that are emerging or reoccurring, plus all of the technical debt that we have in our organizations from various assessments and so forth, where we've got a long laundry list of things to do, and then the cross-functional work we need to do to try to secure net new stuff that's coming in. It's a tall order for us.
So there's been a lot of talk today about artificial intelligence, and I think the presentation earlier about how it's being used with phishing emails is illustrative of the power you can get out of that. So I want to take that a step further. So whether you're calling it, accelerating the attacks with AI, I like to call it offensive AI, but my assessment is 3 to 5 years from now, AI is going to be able to go through the cyber kill chain with very little human intervention, right? It'll be as simple as saying, I want you to research Sammons Financial Group, prepare a phishing campaign, steal credentials of their system administrators, and get me their policyholder information. And it's going to take time and training and expertise to prepare that AI, but guarantee it's already happening. So my strategy to address that, really 3 things. 1, I want to have partners that have a good story to tell from a defensive AI perspective, right? Do they have the right strategy, and are they staying up to date and relevant in protecting my organization? So that's one piece. The second piece is our vendors need to be able to integrate together. So there's that integration piece. And then the third piece, there was some discussion earlier about dwell time, right? So imagine that an APT type of attack can be realized in days instead of months, right? So you need to be able to respond quickly. So security automation and response is real important. So you need to be able to identify but then respond, because you're not going to have enough time to open a ticket, call somebody in the middle of the night, and to start investigating, because at that point it's too late.
And while preparing for this, I did some research. I actually found a couple more. I'm going to throw it out and let you, add to what you've already said as far as the emerging threats. One that I found that keeps popping up is things related to the cloud. Cloud security as a challenge. How do you see that impacting the other emerging threats, such as AI? You can start with Paul, go in reverse the direction.
All right, so the threats in the cloud, and it was touched on earlier, most data loss in the cloud is from misconfiguration. So our strategy around the cloud is trying to get it right the first time, but then being able to monitor the configurations over time to manage and monitor for drift from that configuration, trying to ensure you've got a secure standard and it's maintained throughout. Now, you had mentioned something about AI in there.
Yeah, how AI is impacting security within the cloud environment specifically. Is it causing more concern? Are organizations like yours going towards more stringent controls in the cloud, or are you strictly relying on the AWS, Azure, GCP security tools that they provide as part of their
Yeah, so
offering?
as far as our cloud journey goes, we're using a lot of software as a service but from an infrastructure as a service or platform, that's really a small part of our current infrastructure. So certainly AI is a concern in that space. Some of the concerns we have around AI that's cloud-based is as partners like Salesforce, Microsoft, and others are enabling AI in the platforms or services that we're getting, that we're providing the right training and awareness and guardrails to our staff on what they should and should not be doing within those platforms.
Thank you. Great answer. Michael?
As excuse me, as I talk to CISOs literally all around the United States, what I'm hearing the most is the cloud story is one of basics, right? And I think my colleague just shared that very succinctly. We have to do the fundamental things correctly from the start to the finish. We can't do it in a band-aided approach and expect that someone's going to have the time, we've already talked about the time narrative, to go back and facilitate correction. Therefore, right out of the gate, it has to be correct. We have to also understand that in this shared responsibility model, there's a piece and a part that our teams have to do, and there's a part that the CSP has to do. I don't think that it's enough from what I'm hearing from my colleagues for us to go and think, well, it's their responsibility. Well, it might be contractually, but it's our responsibility to make sure that that's taking place. So in the same way that we have strong controls in the old data center model, what we're finding is that we're not doing the exact same thing in the cloud. We're taking things for granted because it's the cloud. And yet, he just made mention, the very thing that we all seem to find ourselves faced with when there is a breach in the cloud is a simple misconfiguration with some good posture management that could have been resolved.
I would just build on what the two previous panelists said, and for that what I would say is when you're going to go into this situation and you're migrating or moving things to the cloud or getting ready to do that, it's like a prenup agreement. You need to look at that very closely. You need to see what's included in that agreement and what's not. Do you have a right to audit? Do you have the right to pen test? Who's doing what? So just like Michael said, when something goes wrong, and you notice I didn't say if, I said when something goes wrong, you need to know who's doing what. Ultimately, you can put something in the cloud, but at the end of the day, you're still responsible for it. You maintain responsibility for it.
Thank you. Welcome, Leah. Glad you're now with us. I don't know if you heard the question as you were coming through, but the original question was, what are the emerging threats that you see in the realm of cybersecurity? So I'll give you a three-part question. First, give a quick introduction of yourself. Second would be to answer that question. And third, address what has already been addressed as to cloud issues related to the burgeoning AI environment that we're all seeing.
Sure, and sorry I'm late, everyone, but good to be here. Leah McLean, Vice President, Cybersecurity Specialist at Mastercard. I actually sit within a business unit versus corporate security, but am a business partner to them and many of the other teams. On emerging threats, there's so many. I think, biggest ones definitely around geopolitical, nation-state attacks, cyber warfare becoming more and more. And then I'll go there on AI, right? In case they didn't already, but they probably did. As much as I think we are looking to embrace it and find ways to use it, there's a lot of safety measures we need to look at, and looking at educating the workforce, number one, because it's already happening and coming in. Putting the guardrails and policies around the protection, and I'm going to say it again, the education that needs to go into play. It's also a big threat, and ultimately when you look at AIG and how it's evolving, and you look at what AI can do from every aspect and beyond humans, I do think it's a real on the side of existential threats. But it'll be interesting to see how it evolves and what we can do with it to also help us in our jobs.
Great, thank you. Now, one area that nobody touched on as an emerging threat is industry skills shortages. And so I'd like to throw that out and see, because I've heard both sides of the coin, that there's a lot of positions, but there's not enough people to fill them. And there's a lot of people looking, but there's not enough jobs for those people looking. So I'd like to get different perspectives from both the government, which we have 2 representatives, and the private sector, financial services, and get your feeling on what you see as, are skill shortages and staffing shortages really a threat, or is it an overblown conversation that's going on? Let's start with Michael over here.
I'd say there are problems. There are problems with getting the right talent. But for example, I'm North Dakota, and being North Dakota, let's be honest, if I want to find someone that can do SAST or DAST, malware analysis, if I want to find a pen tester, I'm not going to find that person in state many times. It's hard for me to do. So we've tackled that in a couple of different ways. One of the things we've done is we've aligned with the colleges inside the state. So we've got the colleges to align to teach the types of curriculum that we need for the roles we have. Second one I have is that I've adopted something I call sharpen the saw. So anybody comes on my team, and generally folks on my team when they start many times are quite green, but when they start, they get a series of technical training seminars that they can go do. They can do conferences like this, but in between I have what I call gates. So if they want to get to a SANS course, if they want to get to that, first they have to do better report writing. They have to do better presentation skills. Then they can move to that next technical course. So I try to give them that balance of the soft skills and the technical skills. So my team this last year, I had 3 members of my team that went to America's Cup Challenge. That was Cyber Challenge, over 200 teams nationwide. My team was the only government team there. We finished 2nd place. And one of those individuals used to work at Papa John's. Another one used to work for another fast food restaurant. Third one worked for his mother's embroidery company where they did that kind of stuff. But skilling them up and them having what I would say are 3 things. They had desire, they had the ability to want to do it, and the ability to want to learn. Those were the things that really drove that forward. So skill shortage is there, but there are ways you can fill that, interns, apprenticeships, and looking for those right people, honest, humble, and hungry.
I don't know that I have a lot to add to that except a very colorful situation that I had to literally think through. And that was in an independent school district, right? These are not the highest paying jobs in the marketplace, right? Far from it. And what I found myself faced with is I still have a need for security architects, AppSec folks, people who can do analysis and privacy work. But when I look at the pay scale in private sector versus what my human resources team is allowing me to offer, and I don't even have a hand in the offer process, it's another handicap, I had to become very creative in that process to compel people to come. And just like Mike, I've developed a system of sort to take people, because I can't get the same ones that these colleagues can have. I've got to get folks who are willing to learn, who are willing to accept that lower pay and train them up. We also made measures with HCM to bring down the requirements so that everybody didn't have to have a 4-year degree. They could have some professional certifications, some time at another employer, and that really counted. And so these things, along with the training effort, we were able to take people who were somewhat green and make them into some fantastic employees. So our world does require a wee bit of ingenuity from time to time.
So my comments are going to build on what you were talking about. I believe there is a shortage and there's a threat, but I think some of it is self-inflicted. One of the things that I do is I mentor transitioning military members as they're looking to join the civilian workforce. And they often run into issues where entry-level jobs require several years of experience, or they need a CISSP. Well, you can't get that until you have 5 years experience, right? So companies need to be willing to bring people in that are green but hungry, and they may have the right education and skills, but little to no experience, right? We need to bring them in and train them, and that'll assist. So at our company, when we have a vacancy, we don't always go, we need, the most senior engineer. We've got some senior engineers, and we try to bring in entry-level people or people from other parts of the company that have institutional knowledge and are hungry to get into the field. And that's something that's benefited us.
And before Leah answers, I want to do a follow-up question. I do a lot of work with transitioning veterans as well. How do you change the philosophy and mentality of a company that may be reluctant to hire somebody who doesn't have that experience, who's coming out of the military but has project management experience, has leadership experience, has other traits that the military instills? How do you get the senior leaders, the HR people, the hiring managers to see that these are valued employees or will be valued employees despite the lack of experience?
Well, I can do that at my organization, right? And just sharing that with this group is educating the people here about some of the challenges that are out there. And you can go back to your organizations and say, how are we treating entry-level people? Are we expecting too much? Is that one of the reasons why we can't fill the roles?
Right, thank you.
Yeah, for each of what they all said, I definitely agree with many different aspects of it. I think too, I personally am a career transitioner, so went through that phase from the other side, if you will. And I also mentor folks that are transitioning into their careers, veterans as well and others. But it's, to me, I mean, we all lack skills to some degree, right? With especially the way technology is changing. So I look at, well, do they have that tenacity? Do they have the willingness to learn? Do they have the motivation? Are they doing self-learning? Are they resourceful? Because those people can be trained up very quickly and are very open to going through the training necessary. And I think it is true, we really need to look at how we all hire differently, because we're not just going to find the skill sets we need from just looking at the traditional methods. Mastercard is trying to change some of how they hire, and we are bringing in entry-level folks and we'll put them into cohorts, and the company as a whole has succession plans, so allows people to move around into different roles. But I think the more that we can do that and help people in the industry to gain those skill sets, who are open to it, who are willing, who have other skill sets that we don't all have in our, if we grew up through the ranks of IT and cyber, we need to do more of that. And I don't think we have a talent shortage either. I think there's a lot of talent out there. It's just, how are we looking at the talent, and what are we going to do to bring them in to the industry and not make it scary, right?
Great, thank you. Playing off of what was talked about, Laura, obviously cloud is a big issue. This is sort of, you may have answered this, but maybe go a little more in depth. How can an organization strike the right balance between innovation and security when adopting cloud technologies, whether it's a SaaS, whether it's using the GCP or Azure or AWS native environments for the business? How do you strike the right balance in that area? And Leah, why don't you start on that one?
Sure. I mean, I'd say we're still on our journey. I think as a whole, the financial services industry has only in the last year and a half started adopting cloud, similar to us, and we have some multi-cloud. The biggest thing for us is, you need to be open, and obviously there's ways that you can, when you bring in cloud, you can do things faster and better. But at the same time, it takes a very close working relationship with security and having the network segmentation and access, right? Who gets access to what data, to where and when. And if you have everyone aligned and on the same page, there's a lot that can be done, but that alignment's key. And fortunately, we have pretty good groups within cloud security, IT, and security working on that broader mission.
Great.
I think it's important to build the relationships and the processes so that your technology and security leaders can get engaged up front in innovative initiatives and managing expectations. It's easy to go to the cloud, it's hard to do it well, and it's hard to do it securely. And those discussions need to be had with senior leaders up front so they can understand why the pace of change may not match our expectations. because the CEO, other leaders, they need to manage that business risk. They need to be aware of what that risk is. So if you're having the right discussions with the senior leaders, then you're able to manage the pace of change and the innovation and ensuring you put the right controls in place through the process.
One of the things that we've recently done within the last 1.5 years or so is created a charter. And in the charter, it really tells everyone inside of our org, this is what cloud means to us. And so with that, we said that we would also deploy a cloud-first strategy, but not all at once. I think one of the panelists said, right out of the gates, we wanted to make sure that cyber was up front, laying the groundwork, putting in the tools so that we had the exact same coverage that we have in our data center, but in the cloud, east-west, north-south, and all of the various types of posture management that we need. We laid that down first, and after that was done and checked off, and then we started a slow process of beginning to move workloads over. So I think it's all in the methodology. There was a huge push at one time to just get rid of everything that was CapEx, let's go OpEx, data center stinks, and we just moved way too quickly. And thus we're seeing the scenarios play out that are playing out right now with the misconfigurations.
I would build on what Michael said, because I think the approach is really slow and steady wins the race. And so if you've ever seen Jim Collins' book on 10X leaders and what differentiates 10X leaders from normal leaders, one of them is they plan out a slow, steady change. So they look for a series of small incremental changes to make over time. Each one of those changes you make gives you an opportunity to go back to the team and say you got to win. We're not going to do it all at once, just like Michael said. We're going to move one item over. We're going to get it done. We're going to do it right. We're going to celebrate that win. Then we're going to line the next thing up, and we're going to celebrate that win. And as we make these slow, steady changes and moves, we're going to build on that, and what will happen is your momentum will build over time. So you got to pick the projects. There's a million things you can do. You can't move it all at once. Pick one or two wins that you can get out of it. Start with those items, move those, and then keep that pace going, and hopefully you can pick it up over time.
Excellent, thank you. Shift gears a little bit. We have 2 financial services professionals and 2 private, public sector professionals, education and state government. So from that perspective, how can organizations effectively navigate and comply with the evolving cybersecurity and data privacy regulations and standards that are being thrown left and right at us?
That's a big question. Luckily, I've got 3 other people up here on the panel to help with this one, because there's a lot. I mean, just look at the changes we've seen with the SEC and what we see coming out of that. But I'll give you an example. When I started for the state, I had 3 people that worked governance, risk, and compliance. Now, I'm up to over 25 people that work governance, risk, and compliance, and there's still, honestly, more work to always be done. Big piece of it for me was starting third-party risk management, getting a risk management program built in, and starting to say anything I bring in before it ever comes in my environment, it's had an analysis done and we've said it's good or it's bad. If it's not any good, we're not going to allow it on our network. But you got to get ahead of that. Compliance is a constantly changing game. It's a tough one. I'm actually going to be interested to hear what the others say.
So before I try to field that question, I just want to say and share with the audience that there is a huge difference between a compliance framework and a cybersecurity framework. So if all that your organization is concerned about is the compliance framework, that is not going to be a comprehensive strategy. You're not going to be able to realize defense in depth, the basics. What you're going to have are the key things that your governing body, whether it's HIPAA, whether it's PCI DSS, or any of the other state-led initiatives, you're only going to have what they're concerned about. So I just wanted to share that because I speak with so many people and they feel like they're doing the right things, but all they're doing is a little bit of compliance work, and that's not going to be able to cut it. Now,
Checking the box, in other words.
pretty much checking the box. But this is one of those topics where, we have to do what we have to do. I have FERPA and a couple of others that are, really meaty, that require an awful lot of work. And it's a matter of dividing and conquering because, again, we're still working on the day-to-day, keep the lights on stuff. But we also, when those state representatives come in, when those key assessors come in annually, we have to be ready. We have to have the evidence. We have to show efficacy in those controls. And so it takes an awful lot of work and an awful lot of energy from a huge group of folks, just as Mike just noted, to pull all of this off.
The company I work for operates in the financial services space, life insurance, annuities, wealth management. There are some federal regulations we care about, but a lot of our compliance concerns are driven by the individual states. So if you're dealing with 50 states, it's hard to keep track of that. And what we've done in our organization is just built partnerships with the right departments in the company. As far as new or emerging regulations, if I hear about it, right, I'll bring it back to the company, but that's not my job, not my team's job. Our legal department's responsible for tracking that. What are the laws that may be coming out or just hit the books that we need to care about? So we work with them on identifying things coming down the pike. Our privacy officer and my team and other stakeholders as required will then look at those laws, do the gap analysis, and figure out these are the things we need to do to comply. And then we'll use our enterprise risk management meetings and framework to make sure that those are brought to the executives, they have awareness, it's socialized, and then we can get the funding and support to make the changes we need to.
Yeah, we are in a very, very heavily regulated space. We have different groups and teams that manage all of that, and globally as well. I know for data privacy, I've had to be in contract reviews on some other things, and it's taken very, very seriously at our company, and it's complex. In terms of regulations even by state. So for financial services in like the state of New York, for example, and we're headquartered there, there's a regulation if you either do business in that state or you're headquartered there. So you're gonna, we start to see that across many different states too. So at that level, even beyond. And then I think on the SEC, my personal opinion is I think it's a step in the right direction, but I also know that there's quite a few CISOs out there that are trying to work with them to put some redefinition to what exists on disclosures, et cetera. So I think it'll be interesting to see how that changes things. I think today I saw something come out where now the requirement from SEC is on data if it's stored in a SaaS system. So, it's evolving. And yeah, I don't touch on it super closely, but I'm in a company that does.
And I have a follow-up basically to that. It's basically what role does the regulatory compliance aspect play in shaping your cybersecurity posture, and how can you leverage the regulations to your advantage when building a cyber program?
I have most certainly utilized portions of FERPA that had very specific controls, and when we did our CIS assessment, that particular area was a standout for opportunity. I rolled that up into a beautiful presentation, made certain that I was able to share the narrative of the control and with our board and our trustees, and it just seems to work sometimes, but that's not always the case. I think the teachable moment over the course of my leadership career is really packaging that in a way that people understand impact if it doesn't get done, and what that means to the reputation of the organization.
Yeah, so Mike touched on this earlier, that compliance doesn't necessarily mean that you're secure, right? So my recommendation is to look at those compliance requirements and identify how does that fit in your overall cybersecurity plan. And hopefully it's something that you can build on to improve your overall cybersecurity. So when something's regulatory or compliance-based, it's often easier to sell than something that's based off of a risk assessment, right? Because the risk assessment, well, who put that together? Well, me and my team did, right? So basically, you put an assessment together that's telling me that I need to give you money, right? So there's that view, but I don't come up with the state or federal laws. So there's a different perspective on that.
Excellent. Leah or Michael, you want to add, or you don't have to? No. Okay. Shifting gears again, looking at collaboration, information sharing, and threat intelligence. I know some of our earlier speakers spoke about some aspects of the threat intelligence, certainly. How can industry collaboration and information sharing enhance the collective cybersecurity defenses within your respective organizations? Start.
Well, I'll just, I guess, start with what, in my 2 years at the company, that I've seen that's been, one, I've been surprised by how many organizations, both public and private sector, Mastercard collaborates with. It's a lot, and it's great to see that, and at the levels that they do go in and share and collaborate. We also have a fusion center. It's public knowledge based in our St. Louis, Missouri office. And so a lot of the collaboration sharing takes place there. And it's not just the security team, it's many, many different groups and teams from all across the company and very global. So a lot of information is shared on that forum and channel, which is great, and both physical security and other. And then also we're members of so many organizations. So like FSI-SAC is one of them, which is great that I've gotten to be a little bit a part of. And I've really liked seeing the different working groups that they come out with to address the newer things like AI and others and cloud that we see. So it's been a pretty important function for our company and teams.
I was going to comment on the FSI-SAC. So my experience is the FSI-SAC has been pretty solid and beneficial for our organization. The other ISACs out there, I'm assuming, provide the same type of services. Your experiences may vary, but from a collaboration perspective, that's something that we've got a lot of value out in our organization.
Excellent.
We selected the CIS controls because of this very reason. By definition, we gain access to a whole bunch of ISACs because there's like 16 or 17. I'm being funny, but it's not that many, but it's a lot of them. It also gives us access to CISA, a whole bunch of other fusion centers. And on top of that, we've also partnered with a company, I'll reserve the name, you can talk to me later if you want to know about it, that rolls up all of the security for applications, hardware, and edge devices into a single piece of literature that we can use on a day-to-day basis to track all of that stuff, whether it's from the operating system all the way up through hardware.
Thank you.
For me, in the public sector, I would just say this. I came from the private sector before I took this role, and going into government, it's a little different how it works. So one of the things I found is certainly appreciate all the information we get from CISA, from the ISACs, others. But one of the things I found early on is the states didn't talk directly to each other. No states talked directly to the other ones. I actually wanted to change that, and I couldn't do it because we had a state law that said we could only talk to adjacent states. So I actually got that changed. That was one of the first things I did when I took over this role. I got House Bill 1417 passed. So what I did with this was, as soon as I got it passed, I just started calling other state CISOs, and I said, hey, have you ever seen this attack? Have you ever seen any of these things? I said, guess what? If you haven't been hit with it yet, you probably will. And if you've already been hit, then I'll probably be hit next. So we set up something called the Joint State SOC. We've got about 30% now of the nation signed up to this as far as the states. and we share threat intel in real time. So we share threat intel in real time. The other thing we do is allow the analysts to come together, and the analysts from the various states come together once a week, and they spend an hour with each other, which to me is phenomenal, because these individuals are generally eyes down, eyes on glass, looking in their cube, thinking about that. And now they're talking to the other analysts and they're saying, normally when I look at these ILCs, or I look at it, I do this by XYZ, and the other analysts from another state may say, well, I never thought of it doing it that way, I do it another way. So I would just say, if you're not sharing information with others in your industry or sector, set it up. Set it up in a chat group, in Signal, whatever it may happen to be that you want to do, but get those other insiders in your business sector, whatever they are, sharing that information, because you've got a lot to share back and forth. There's companies and entities that can do that too. Get as much of that threat intel as you can, because it's very useful and it will help you when these things happen to see what others have done, what's worked for them, and what hasn't worked.
Excellent. We're going to look at one more topic area before we open it up to questions. As many of you know, many of the breaches that have occurred over the years have been as a result of third-party suppliers, vendors. Home Depot, Target, even SolarWinds would be considered a supply chain issue. So in an interconnected business environment, what measures should an organization take to secure their supply chain against cyber threats?
Well, I think it's hard to secure your supply chain. You could do due diligence, but as far as actually securing it, that's hard, right? So we're a customer of Microsoft. There's nothing I could do to make Microsoft more secure, right? They need to own that. So in the relationship, we need to ensure we're doing the right due diligence from a vendor risk perspective, security risk assessments, depending on how you're interfacing with them. But a lot of the controls are going to be contractual that you need to look at, and then tie that into your incident response plan. If they do have an issue, what's the expectation on when they're going to contact you? Have you established those lines of communication? And for things, you mentioned SolarWinds, MoveIt, other things like that, you can't prevent that, right? If a trusted partner is compromised, they can easily get in your environment and take advantage of that. So then you have to focus on resilience. Mentioned incident response, but you need to focus on your disaster recovery and business continuity capabilities too.
Excellent. Do you include right to audit in all contracts?
Well, so we're working through that. So we've included right to audit in a number of our contracts, and we don't really have the staff to do that. So we've only done a couple audits, and those are with some of the major partners we work with. But some of the guidance coming out of the National Association of Insurance Commissioners is saying if you've got a right to audit in your contract, then you need to go out and audit to see how they're using artificial intelligence, right? So we're trying to figure out, do we change our contracts? What do we do about that?
Excellent.
I'll just build off a little bit about what Paul said. Similar for due diligence, we do have to, I guess, audit, so to speak, or the questionnaire with all of our third parties. But more specifically, we do a lot, Mastercard does a lot of M&A, a lot. And so they go pretty deep on those companies that they're acquiring, and it takes a lot of time. I do know that.
I feel like the key takeaway here, and I think both Paul and Mike have said this already, is there's a need for a strong vendor management program. And unfortunately, it's going to distract or detract from the other day-to-day work. But what you get out of it is incredibly helpful for your overall attack surface. We instituted this about 2 years ago, and we also started to score. Now, we use some other vendors that do this, so we don't depend on that solely, but it does give us a pretty good start with our talks as we're going through systematically looking at all of our vendors. And as we come up for renewal, we're having those older contracts replaced with the language that favors what Paul just said. And so there's a number of things that we can do to try to get our arms around that, making sure that the connections between the two entities, right, are locked down and it's least privilege and least access. So if something does come across, we automatically know, just as Paul noted, from the IR perspective, we should be looking for 443 traffic only, not the whole kit and caboodle.
Michael, do you also use something like external vendors, Recorded Future, or competitors to
Yeah,
theirs?
that's what I was referring to. I'm not supposed to say names, but
Well,
yes, sir.
they're not here, so we can say their name.
Yeah, absolutely. Talk to me after. I'll tell you all about it.
All the other panelists really, to me, hit this nail right on the head. If you think of, IPIT or identify, protect, detect, you think of the process, you're either going to be at the respond phase, putting out fires like a fireman all the time, or you're going to move ahead of it and you're going to be doing, do they have fire extinguishers? Are the systems in place? Are the alarms there? Are you making sure that people do, a check once a year, that they know how to get out in case of a fire? And what I mean by that is you got to move up to the front, to the vendor management. The other key piece is you have to have an asset inventory so you know what you have, because it's that pre-existing stuff, legacy that's out there. You got to know all that. So when it's move it, anything else, if you didn't already get that in a contract previously, you know where it's at, you know what you're dealing with, you can shut it off or isolate it when those bad things happen.
Excellent. I think we've had some great answers and conversation. We've got about 7 minutes or so. I know our tech team has a microphone, so if anybody wants to ask a question of the panelists, raise your hand, make sure you get the microphone before you start talking, so our virtual audience can hear your question as well.
All right. We good? Okay. Heidi Sammons, 25, 30 years in government, and I understand the frustrations with getting talented people in. And what I found out, especially when I became general counsel of my agency, was that the problem was that I don't mean to be offensive to any HR people in the room, but they were dogmatic about, well, no, this job requires this certification, this requires this model. And I would tell them, okay, let's think outside the box. How about we say X certification or equivalent work experience? That will give returning military people a chance to explain what they did. And I've worked with a lot of vets returning, and they'd be surprised the level of sophistication they did while they were in service. All they need is a platform to explain it.
There's a right behind.
So question for both Michaels and Leah. You actually referenced it as well on a variation of that. You talked about sharpening the saw, about bringing people in at an earlier stage of their career, skill developments, that have the hunger to move forward, and you're raising them up. Can you talk or answer, how do you address keeping the people once you do that? Because you've actually added value to them in the process. Thank you.
Well, what I like to do is think about what it was like when I was an individual contributor. I had some really jacked up bosses. So what I've decided is that I'm not going to replicate that. So I do things to encourage them, to stimulate them, to show that I have a genuine concern for their outcomes, not just their work products, right? That's important to me, but I know their family. I know their wives' names. I know their kids. I know what they're up to. I know what their struggles are. So some might say I'm a wee bit hands-on, but it's worked for me over the last 22 years since I've been in management. And since it's working, I don't see a need to change it.
That's a good question. For me, one, it's this. We made the change starting with the hiring process. Because as Seth was over here, we had those same job recs that said, entry-level job, CSSP required, which just blows my mind. But then what we do now is we start with the interview process and we start that questioning, where do you want to be in 5 years? What do you want to do? Mm-hmm. And I'm lucky enough, at least from the government sector, that when I bring people on, I don't have to put them on just one job, like VPN. I can have them do forensics. I can have them do other stuff. The other thing that I've done is we've automated our SOC and we've freed up this headspace or headroom. Then we bring on special projects. So it's like we didn't have forensics. So you know what? I want to build a forensics team. Who wants to do that here? So they go and they start doing forensics, and then I give them an education path over that for the next 18 or 24 months. So with a SOC team, normally you get, what, maybe 18 months? I'm getting over 3 years on my team members before they move on because I keep giving them more interesting projects to work on and I keep them engaged. That's been my approach at least.
I would just highly, highly, highly recommend, and I can't emphasize this enough, be a really good partner to HR. Work really closely with them. I mean, review the job descriptions, rewrite it in the areas you have to, educate them, and just have that close partnership. I had to go through that last year when we were looking at adding someone that would be someone to work with me. And it was great. She admitted, hey, I don't know much about cyber, but I found this on other posts. Do you want to edit it? And I did. I revised it because for me it was I knew I could take people that didn't have all the skill sets, and there is no unicorn, but they can be trained. And having that close partnership actually will result, I think, in a better, hopefully, outlook for who you're trying to recruit. And then I'll just add to the part about how we retain talent, and it's actually one of the reasons I was glad to get the offer at Mastercard because I had read about it in a Harvard Business Review, but we have a succession plan. So even all the way up to the CEO, where all the leaders in the company are always looking at how are they grooming people for the next role, and they're super, super supportive of people moving around within the company into different groups, different organizations and roles, and we promote that heavily, and it's done frequently. So I think when you have those sort of opportunities and you give people that chance because it's going to retain talent, it does make a huge difference.
Paul, any closing words on that?
Yeah, I just like the feedback everyone said. So the question was about retaining talent. I'm actually okay people moving on, right? I just want it to be a good experience for them. They provide value to us. I want to retain a certain amount of the team. And if people are leaving, I want them to be leaving for the right reasons, right? Growth, different opportunities, something better for them, right?
Thank you. Well, I want you all to thank our panelists, Gregg, Michael Anderson, Paul Mocarski, and Leah McLean. I know I enjoyed listening to them, and I learned some, so I hope you all did too. And if Kim is around, we'll turn it back over to her. If she's not, the bar's open.